Every woman in the VIP section of the Vanta, Seoul's most exclusive nightclub, was fighting for a glimpse of the king. They draped themselves over the velvet railings like expensive silk, their eyes hungry, their intentions clear. They wanted the power, the thrill, the proximity to danger. They wanted Kang Taeos, the ruthless heir to the Seven Stars Syndicate, the man who ruled the city's underworld with a silence louder than a gunshot. Girls like Chanel and Porsche, thick, gorgeous, and draped in designer labels that cost more than a car, pushed and shoved, laughing too loud, arching their backs, doing everything to be the chosen one for the night. They saw Taeos as a winning lottery ticket. But Taeos? He barely saw them at all. To him, they were just background noise, static in a world that was already too loud. The only person in the entire club who wasn't looking at him was the woman standing directly in front of him behind the bar. Shifurum. Welcome back to Ken's Romance Stories, the only place on the internet where love hits harder than a Mafia enforcement squad. If you are watching this and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, I have to ask, who hurt you? Do you enjoy missing out on the kind of stories that make your heart race and your palms sweat? Don't be the person who watches the romance unfold from the outside like a stranger in the rain. Join the family. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get into the story that is going to ruin you in the best way possible. The air inside the Vanta smelled of expensive cologne, ozone, and desperation. Bass thumped in the floorboards, a heartbeat that synced with the pulse of the city. Kang Taeyo sat in the center of his private booth, a glass of untouched bourbon in his hand. He was a man carved from cold marble, his face perfectly symmetrical, his eyes dark voids that absorbed the light. Beside him, Chanel, a stunning woman with curves that stopped traffic and a personality designed to please, was whispering something in his ear, her hand resting boldly on his thigh. On his other side, Portia was laughing at a joke he hadn't made, flipping her hair, checking her reflection in her phone screen to make sure the lighting hit her jewelry just right. They were beautiful. They were willing. And Taeos was bored out of his mind. He stood up abruptly. The music didn't stop, but the air around his table shifted. His security detail stiffened, hands hovering near concealed weapons. Chanel pouted, reaching for him. "Appa, where are you going? The bottle service is just getting started." Taeos didn't answer. He didn't have to. He walked out of the VIP section, descending the stairs like a god coming down from Olympus to walk among mortals. The crowd parted instantly. Fear was a powerful perfume, and Taeos wore it well. He walked straight to the main bar, the busiest, loudest, most chaotic part of the club. That was where Chifurum was. She was poetry in motion. While the other bartenders were flustered, sweating, and messing up orders, Shifurum moved with a rhythm that was all her own. Her dark skin glowed under the violet neon lights, her hair pulled back in a practical, no-nonsense style that somehow highlighted the elegance of her neck. She wasn't wearing the revealing outfits the other staff wore to get tips. She wore a crisp white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, revealing strong, capable forearms. She was shaking a tin with one hand, pouring a draft with the other, her face a mask of absolute concentration. She didn't look up when the crowd parted. She didn't look up when the ominous silence of the boss's presence fell over the bar. She just slid a coaster onto the counter and looked at the customer next to him. "Next," she said. Her voice was cool, smooth, like jazz on a rainy Sunday. Taeos sat on a stool. The customer she was serving took one look at Taeos, turned pale, and scrambled away without his drink. Chifurum paused. She looked at the fleeing customer, then finally turned her eyes to Teos. She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She didn't bat her eyelashes or lick her lips like Chanel and Porsche did. She just looked at him with eyes the color of deep espresso, eyes that held a history he couldn't read. "You scared off my tip," she said flatly. Teos blinked. In his 30 years of life, no one had ever spoken to him like that, not unless they wanted to die. "He seemed in a hurry," Teos replied, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the counter. "He seemed terrified," Chifirum corrected. She wiped the counter in front of him, her movements efficient, precise. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" Teos repeated, amused. Usually, people offered him things. "Surprise me." "I'm a bartender, not a magician. Give me a base." "Whiskey," he said. "Make me something that tastes like the truth." Chifirum held his gaze for a second longer than was polite. It was a challenge. He saw it in the set of her jaw. She turned around, scanning the shelves. Most bartenders would have reached for the most expensive bottle, the Blue Label or the 30-year-old single malt, trying to impress the billionaire owner. Chifirum bypassed the top shelf entirely. She reached for a bottle of rye, spicy, rough, unpretentious, and grabbed a bottle of Amaro. She worked in silence. No flair, no juggling bottles, just brutal efficiency. She stirred the drink over a single large ice cube, peeled an orange twist with a knife that looked sharp enough to be a weapon, and slid the glass toward him. "A black Manhattan," she said. "Bitter, strong, no sugar to hide the taste." Teos lifted the glass. He took a sip. It was perfect. It tasted like smoke and shadows. "Good," he murmured. "You're American." "Nigerian," she corrected, not looking up as she started washing a glass. "Born in Lagos, raised in Chicago. Does it matter?" "It explains why you don't bow," he said softly. "I bow to God," Chifirum said, meeting his eyes again. "And my mother. You aren't either." The tension at the bar was thick enough to choke on. His security guards were twitching, ready to drag her across the counter for the disrespect, but Teos smiled. It was a small, terrifying thing, a crack in the marble. "Chifirum," he said, reading the name tag pinned to her apron. "What does it mean?" She hesitated. "It means God has seen me." "I see you," Teos said. "Yeah, well..." Chifirum turned away to serve a college kid who was waving a credit card. "You're blocking the paying customers. Either drink or move, boss." Teos stayed. He sat there for 2 hours, nursing that single drink, just watching her work. He watched the way she handled the drunks with firm grace. He watched the way she didn't smile unless she meant it. He watched the way she existed in his world without being corrupted by it. Up in the VIP section, Chanel and Porsche were fuming. They watched their golden goose sitting at the common bar, staring at the help. "Look at her," Chanel hissed, sipping her champagne aggressively. "She's not even that pretty. She looks like she's going to a library, not a club. Why is he staring at her?" "Maybe he's firing her," Portia suggested hopefully. "Or maybe she stole something." "I'm going down there," Chanel decided. She smoothed her dress, checked her cleavage, and marched down the stairs, her heels clicking like war drums. She sashayed up to the bar, sliding in between Teos and a regular. She leaned over the counter, snapping her fingers in Chifurum's face. "Hey, you! Service!" Chanel barked. Chifirum finished pouring a beer, then walked over slowly. "I can hear you. You don't need to snap." "I need a vodka soda, with 3 limes, and make it strong. I know who you are, thinking you can ignore us just because the boss is pitying you." Chanel laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. Just because he's bored doesn't mean you're special, sweetheart. You're just the entertainment. Chifurum's expression didn't change. She looked at Chanel's expensive manicure, then at her desperate eyes. Vodka soda, Chifurum repeated. She made the drink. She placed it on the counter. But just as Chanel reached for it, Chifurum didn't let go of the glass. She held it for a second, forcing Chanel to look at her. The boss isn't pitying me, Chifurum said, her voice low. Only audible to Chanel and Teos. And I'm not the entertainment. I'm the one making sure you have a drink to hold while you pretend he cares about you. Chanel's face turned red. You little... She raised her hand, ready to slap the glass, to cause a scene, to assert her dominance. A hand caught Chanel's wrist in midair. It wasn't Chifurum, it was Teos. His grip was loose, casual, but Chanel froze like a rabbit in a trap. Don't, Teos said. He didn't shout. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. You'll break the glass, and Chifurum just polished it. Appa, she insulted me, Chanel whined, trying to pull her arm back. She thinks she's better than us. She is, Teos said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Chanel looked as if he had slapped her. Portia, who had followed her down, gasped. Go back upstairs, Teos commanded, releasing her wrist. Or go home. I don't care which. Chanel fled, tears of humiliation stinging her eyes. Portia followed, shooting a glare at the bar. Teos turned back to Chifurum. He expected gratitude. He expected a thank you. You didn't have to do that, Chifurum said, wiping the condensation off the bar. I can handle high-maintenance girls. I have 3 sisters. I know you can handle them, Teos said. But in my club, no one touches the artwork. I'm not artwork, Chifurum snapped, her patience finally fraying. I'm an employee, and you're making it very hard for me to do my job. Why are you here, King Teos? Why are you obsessing over me? I'm not rich. I'm not Korean. I'm not playing your game. That's exactly why, he admitted. He leaned in, the scent of sandalwood and rain surrounding her. Everyone in this city wants something from me, money, protection, power. They look at me and they see a bank account or a gun. You look at me and you see a nuisance. A very large, very dangerous nuisance, she agreed. I like it, he said. It's the first real thing I've felt in years. Real gets you killed in your line of work, Chifurum said, turning to check the register. You should stick to the fakes. They're safer. I don't want safe, he whispered. That desire for danger, for something real, is what kept him coming back, night after night, until the rain began to fall in earnest, bringing with it an intimacy that neither of them were prepared for. The rain in Seoul didn't fall like it did in Chicago. In Chicago, rain was angry. It slapped the pavement and demanded to be felt. In Seoul, the rain was a ghost, a mist that turned the neon city into a watercolor painting of blurred lights and wet asphalt. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the golden hour at the Vanta. This was the time when the fake influencers and the tourists had gone home, leaving only the hardcore drinkers, the insomniacs, and the predators. And of course, the king. King Teos had stopped sitting in the VIP section entirely. The velvet ropes, the $5,000 bottle service, the models like Porsche who laughed with their mouths but not their eyes, it all felt like a costume he was too tired to wear. Instead, he claimed the corner stool at the main bar. It was his spot now. Even when he wasn't there, no one dared to sit in it. It was like the throne of a ghost. Chifurum was closing out the register. The club was quiet, the DJ having switched from pounding techno to a low, vibrating lofi beat that sounded like a heartbeat underwater. You're still here, Chifurum said, not looking up from her receipt printer. Don't you have an empire to run? People to intimidate? Teo swirled the ice in his glass. The empire runs itself at night, and I'm currently intimidating a very stubborn bartender. It's a full-time job. I'm not intimidated, she said, ripping the paper tape. I'm annoyed. You're blocking my cleaning rag. Play something else, Teos commanded softly. Chifurum paused. She looked at the DJ booth, which was empty, the playlist on autopilot. Excuse me. This music. Teos gestured vaguely with his glass. It's soulless. It's elevator music for people who are high. You hum when you work, Chifurum. I've watched you. When the bass drops out, you hum. What is it? Chifurum stiffened. She hadn't realized he was watching that closely. She kept her parts separate. Chifurum the bartender was a machine. Chifurum the woman was a secret. It's nothing. It sounded like Coltrane, Teos said. She stopped wiping the bar. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was wearing a black silk shirt, the top buttons undone, revealing the edge of a tattoo that crept up his chest, a dragon's claw, ink dark against pale skin. But his eyes weren't looking at her body. They were waiting for an answer. You know John Coltrane? She asked, skepticism heavy in her voice. My father was a monster, Teos said calmly, as if discussing the weather. But he had an impeccable vinyl collection. He believed that if you listened to Blue Train loud enough, it would drown out the screaming from the basement. The air between them grew heavy. It was a dark joke, but neither of them laughed. Chifurum walked over to the small Bluetooth speaker she kept behind the bar for closing time. She tapped her phone. A moment later, the hollow synthesized beats of the club faded, replaced by the warm, scratching sound of a saxophone. It was In a Sentimental Mood. Slow, melancholic, achingly human. The sound filled the empty space between them. It changed the air. The Vanta stopped feeling like a high-end meat market and started feeling like a confessional. Better, Teos murmured. He closed his eyes for a second, leaning his head back. For a moment, the mask of the Mafia boss slipped. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man carrying the weight of 1,000 sins. You look tired, Chifurum said. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Teos opened his eyes. I don't sleep. Sleep is when the ghosts come back to ask for their money. You need to eat, she said. When was the last time you had a meal that wasn't liquid? He looked at his whiskey. Does this count? Chifurum rolled her eyes. She reached under the counter and pulled out a plastic Tupperware container. It wasn't glamorous. It was stained orange from spices. It was the most out-of-place object in the entire multi-million-dollar club. She popped the lid. The smell hit him instantly. Rich, savory, spicy, with a hint of smoke that cut through the scent of stale champagne and expensive perfume. What is that? Teos sat up straighter. Jollof, she said. And before you ask, it's Nigerian jollof. I don't want to hear any debates about Ghana or Senegal tonight. I'm too tired. Jollof, he tested the word. It smells angry and comforting. It's both, she said. She grabbed 2 plastic forks. She hesitated, then slid the container to the middle of the bar, right over the boundary line between customer and staff. Eat. Teos looked at the plastic fork. He was a man who ate with silver chopsticks in private dining rooms where the bill was more than her rent. He looked at the orange rice. Then he looked at her. He took a bite. The heat hit him first, the Scotch bonnet pepper kicking the back of his throat. Then the tomato, the onions, the thyme, the deep, smoky flavor of rice that had been burned just the right amount at the bottom of the pot. He chewed slowly. His eyes widened slightly. It's spicy. he said, clearing his throat. It's not spicy. Chifurum smirked, taking a bite herself. It's just waking you up. You've been sleepwalking, Kang Teos. Who made this? I did. In my tiny apartment kitchen with a pot that's older than me. It's not perfect. I can't get the right peppers here in Seoul, and the rice is a little different, but... She trailed off, a shadow passing over her face. It tastes like my mother's kitchen on a Sunday. Teos took another bite, larger this time. You miss it. Home. I miss the noise, she admitted, leaning her elbows on the bar. The music swirled around them. Lagos is never quiet. Chicago is never quiet. Seoul is quiet even when it's loud. People hear scream inside their hearts, but their faces are silent. It makes me lonely. Lonely, Teos repeated. He put the fork down. I have 500 men who would die for me. I have women who would kill to be in my bed. I own half this district. And yet, Chifurum said softly, you're eating leftover rice with the help at 3 a.m. because you don't want to go home to your empty penthouse. Teos stared at her. It felt like she had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. My grandmother, Teos started, his voice dropping an octave. She used to make kimchi jjigae. It's a stew, fermented cabbage, pork belly, tofu. It smells terrible to people who don't know it, like rotting garbage. Chifurum nodded. The best food always smells a little dangerous. She would let it simmer for days, he continued. The older the kimchi, the deeper the taste. She told me that bitterness, if you give it time and heat, turns into depth. She died when I was 12. My father took over the kitchen. He didn't cook. He just consumed. He looked at the Yalof rice. I haven't tasted anything that felt like home since I was 12 years old. Until this. He pushed the container back toward her, but his hand brushed hers. Electric current. Absolute. Undeniable. They both froze. His skin was cool. Hers was warm. It wasn't a sexual touch. It was simpler than that and far more dangerous. It was an acknowledgement. I am here. You are here. Chifurum pulled her hand back slowly. She didn't look away, but her breathing hitched. You're a dangerous man, Teos, she whispered. And I don't mean the guns. I mean, you make people want to save you, and that's how women like me get killed. I don't want to be saved, Teos said, his eyes burning into hers. I'm past redemption, Chifurum. I know where I'm going when I die. I don't want to be alone while I'm waiting for the train. That's selfish, she said. I'm a criminal, he replied. Selfish is my baseline. He picked up his glass of whiskey. Tell me about Chicago. Tell me about the wind. And so she did. For another hour, the Mafia boss and the bartender sat in the wreckage of the night, trading memories like currency. She told him about the winter wind off Lake Michigan that froze your eyelashes. He told her about the pressure of being the crown prince of a crime syndicate, how he had to cut off his own finger once to prove loyalty to a father who didn't love him. She didn't judge him. She didn't gasp. She just listened, eating her rice, nodding as if cutting off a finger was as normal as missing a bus. You're strong, he observed. Stronger than my men. I'm a black woman living in Korea, she laughed dryly. If I wasn't strong, I would have crumbled into dust 2 years ago. I have to be steel, Teos. I don't have the luxury of being soft. I could make it soft for you, he offered. The temptation in his voice was heavy. I could give you a life where you never have to work again, where you never have to stand on your feet for 10 hours, where no one looks at you sideways. Chifurum stopped chewing. She put the lid back on the Tupperware. The snap of the plastic was loud in the quiet bar. And what would that cost me? she asked. My freedom? My voice? Would I just be another Chanel, waiting for you to tell me I'm pretty? No, he said fiercely. Never that. It always ends that way, she said, standing up and moving the food to the back fridge. The golden cage is still a cage, Teos, and I was born to fly. I prefer my sore feet and my empty bank account. At least they're mine. She turned back to him. The moment was breaking. The sun was threatening to rise, turning the sky outside from black to a bruised purple. Go home, boss, she said, her voice returning to its professional distance, though her eyes were softer now. The magic hour is over. The ghosts are coming back. Teos stood up. He adjusted his suit jacket, the mask sliding back into place. The ruthlessness returned to his posture, but he paused before he turned away. Thank you, he said. For what? For the rice, he said, and for not being afraid of the heat. He walked out of the club, leaving Chifurum alone in the silence. She watched his back as he left, the broad shoulders, the lonely stride. She touched the spot on her hand where his skin had brushed hers. It still tingled. She looked at the empty glass he had left behind. Idiot, she whispered to the empty room. You're going to fall for him, and it's going to destroy you. She turned the jazz off. The silence rushed back in, but this time it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the calm before a storm. And she was right, because outside, in the parking lot, the storm was already gathering. Chanel was sitting in her car, watching Teos leave, her phone pressed to her ear, her nails digging into the steering wheel. Yeah, Chanel whispered into the phone, her eyes fixed on the club's entrance. It's the bartender, the African one. She's the problem. Get rid of her. I don't care how. Just make sure she never comes back to the Vanta. The line clicked dead. The jazz was gone. The Yaloff was gone, and the war had just begun. The Vanta looked different from the back alley. Out front, it was polished chrome, velvet ropes, and dreams waiting to happen. Out back, by the employee entrance, it was just dumpsters overflowing with empty champagne bottles, the smell of stale beer and bleach, and asphalt slick with rain and grease. It was 4:15 a.m. Chifurum pushed the heavy metal service door open, the cool morning air hitting her face like a damp towel. Her feet were screaming in her sensible work shoes. Her shoulders ached from shaking tins for 8 hours straight. All she wanted was a hot shower to scrub the scent of other people's expensive mistakes off her skin and her bed. She pulled her coat tighter around her. She didn't have a car. The subway wasn't running yet. She had a 20-minute walk to the night bus stop. It was the part of the night she hated the most. The vulnerability of the commute between the fortress of the club and the safety of her apartment. She took 3 steps down the alley towards the street-lit road, clutching her heavy canvas tote bag to her chest. A car engine turned on. High beams flicked on, blinding her. Chifurum froze, throwing a hand up to shield her eyes. It wasn't a sedan. It was a bright yellow Porsche Cayenne, subtle as a brick to the face. The doors opened. Chanel stepped out from the driver's side, wrapped in a white fur coat that probably cost more than Chifurum made in 6 months. Portia tumbled out of the passenger side, looking nervous, her eyes darting around the empty alley. "Going somewhere, sweetheart?" Chanel called out. Her voice was brittle, high-pitched with adrenaline and cheap champagne. Chifurum lowered her hand. She didn't run. You don't run in Chicago when someone pulls up on you. It just makes you pray. She planted her feet. "It's 4 a.m., Chanel," Chifurum said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "Go home and sleep off the jealousy. It's not a good look on you." "Jealousy?" Chanel laughed, a screeching sound that bounced off the brick walls. She walked closer, her heels clicking unsteadily on the wet pavement. Of what? You're the help. You clean up our messes. You think just because the boss ate your nasty little rice dish that you're somebody now? I think he was hungry, Chifarum said, and I think you're terrified because for the first time in your life, being pretty and loud isn't enough to get what you want. Chanel stopped 3 feet away. Up close, Chifarum could see the cracks in the porcelain doll facade, the smudged mascara, the trembling lower lip. You don't belong here, Chanel spat, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. She looked Chifarum up and down with unveiled disgust. Look at you, your hair, your skin. You stick out like a sore thumb in his world. You're ruining the aesthetic. You're embarrassing him. Chifarum felt a cold spike of anger in her chest. It wasn't the first time she'd heard it in this city, but tonight, after the warmth of the Jolliffe and Jazz, it stung more. My skin is fine, Chifarum said icily, and my hair is none of your damn business. Now move out of my way. I'm going home. She took a step forward, intending to walk right past Chanel. Chanel shoved her hard in the chest. Chifarum stumbled back a step, dropping her bag. Don't touch me. Or what? Chanel sneered. You gonna cry to Daddy Teos? He's gone, bitch. He went home to his real life. You're just the midnight snack. Chanel snapped her fingers over her shoulder. Do it. The back doors of the Cayenne opened. 2 men stepped out. They weren't syndicate men. They weren't wearing sharp suits and earpieces. These were street thugs, hired muscle in track suits, thick-necked and smelling of cheap cigarettes. Chanel had gone bargain hunting for violence. Portia squeaked. Chanel, you said we were just going to scare her. Shut up, Chanel hissed. She looked back at Chifarum, smiling triumphantly. Teos won't fire you because he's amused by you right now, but if you can't work, if your face is messed up, he'll get bored, and you'll have to leave. The 2 men stepped forward, blocking the alley exit. They cracked their knuckles dramatically. It was pathetic, but they were big, and there were 2 of them. Chifarum looked at the men. Then she looked at Chanel. You idiot, Chifarum whispered. Get her, Chanel commanded. The first guy lunged. He was slow, expecting her to scream or cower. She didn't. Chicago kicked in. Chifarum dropped her center of gravity. She didn't step back. She stepped in. As his clumsy haymaker swing went wide over her head, she drove the heel of her palm upward, hard, straight into his nose. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage. He howled, stumbling back, blood gushing over his tracksuit, blinding him. The second guy hesitated, surprised. That split second was all she needed. Chifarum grabbed her heavy canvas tote bag from the ground. It was loaded with her thick bartending book, a metal water bottle, and a change of clothes. It weighed about 15 pounds. She swung it like a medieval mace. The bag connected squarely with the second guy's ear with a dense thwack. He went down to one knee, dazed, the equilibrium knocked right out of him. Chifarum stood over them, breathing hard, her fists clenched. Her nice work shirt was torn at the shoulder. I grew up dodging bullets on the south side and fighting grown men off me on the L train, Chifarum snarled at them, her voice raw. You think 2 discount bouncers and a spoiled brat in a leased Porsche are gonna take me out? Chanel was screaming now, terrified, backing away toward her car. Get up! Useless idiots! Get up and hit her! The first guy, nose broken, roared in anger and charged her again, blind with rage. He was too big for her to fight head-on for long. He grabbed her by the collar, slamming her back against the brick wall of the club. Her head cracked against the masonry. Stars exploded in her vision. He raised a massive fist to cave her face in. Click. The sound was small, metallic, and infinitely terrifying. It stopped the man's fist in midair. The service door to the Vanta had opened quietly. Standing there was the head of Teos's personal night security detail, a man named Viper. He was 6'4" of silent menace in a tailored suit. He held a Glock 19 with a suppressor attached, pointed directly at the attacker's temple. "Let her go," Viper said. His voice was quieter than a whisper, but it carried the weight of the entire syndicate. The attacker dropped Chifurum like she was on fire, putting his hands up, blood streaming down his face. Chifurum slid down the wall slightly, dizzy, touching the back of her head. Her hand came away with a smear of blood. Viper didn't even look at the two thugs. He looked past them to Chanel, who was frozen by her car door, her face pale as death. "Miss Chanel," Viper said smoothly, "the boss has a very strict policy about his staff being harassed, especially the staff he likes." I didn't... They were just..." Chanel stammered, her voice barely audible. "Leave," Viper said. "If I see this yellow car within 5 miles of this building again, I will crush it into a cube, with you inside it." Chanel scrambled into the driver's seat. The two hired goons didn't even wait for her. They bolted down the alley on foot, leaving their dignity behind. The Porsche peeled out, tires screeching, disappearing into the night. Viper holstered his weapon in one fluid motion. He walked over to Chifurum and extended a hand. "Are you all right, Miss Chifurum?" She stared at his hand for a second, then swatted it away. She pushed herself up the wall, wincing as the alley spun around her. "I had it handled," she muttered, dusting off her torn shirt. "I saw," Viper said, a hint of amusement in his otherwise dead eyes. "That left hook was impressive, but the boss pays me to ensure the assets arrive home safely." "I am not an asset," she spat, picking up her battered tote bag. "Tell him that," Viper said. He tapped his earpiece. "Bring the car around to the alley. The package is secure but slightly damaged. And call the boss. Wake him up." "Don't you dare call him," Chifurum said, panic cutting through the pain in her head. "It's fine. I'm fine." Viper just looked at her. "He gave explicit orders tonight. After the rice, he said if anyone touched you, he wanted to know before the body was cold." Chifurum felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Teos had watched them bond, shared his vulnerability, and then immediately set his wolves to watch over her. It wasn't romantic. It was suffocating. A sleek black company sedan pulled up the alley. "Get in, Miss Chifurum," Viper said, opening the back door. "The night bus isn't safe anymore. You're in his world now." Chifurum looked at the open door of the luxury car. It looked like the mouth of a beast waiting to swallow her whole. Her head was throbbing. She was bleeding. She was tired of fighting. She got in the car. As the heavy door thudded shut, sealing her into the leather-scented silence, she realized Chanel was right about one thing. Her old life was over. Teos had claimed her, and she had no idea that this was just the prologue to the real violence. Because the underworld does not tolerate peace, and it certainly doesn't tolerate a king who is distracted. It happened 3 days later, a Tuesday. The club was lighter than usual. Chifurum was back behind the bar, a small bandage on her forehead covered by her curls. Teos was at the bar, actually laughing, at a story Chifurum was telling about her childhood in Chicago. The front doors exploded inward. It wasn't a raid. It was an assassination attempt. Men in dark masks stormed in, assault rifles raised. The music cut out, replaced by the terrifying staccato of automatic fire. Glass shattered. People screamed, diving under tables. Teos moved instantly. He didn't run for the exit. He vaulted over the bar. He grabbed Chifurum, tackling her to the floor just as the shelf of expensive tequilas behind her disintegrated in a shower of glass and liquor. They hit the rubber mat hard, Teos covering her body with his own, his heavy suit jacket shielding her from the debris. "Stay down," he roared, drawing a sleek black handgun from a holster she hadn't even noticed. But Chifurum wasn't freezing up. Beneath him, she was moving. She wasn't looking at the gunman. She was looking at the end of the bar, where the barback, a young kid named Jiho, was curled up bleeding from a graze on his arm, paralyzed with fear in the open. "Jiho!" Chifurum screamed. She shoved Teos. "Get off me! I have to get Jiho!" "Are you insane?" Teos grabbed her arm. "You'll get shot. He's a kid." She broke his grip with a strength that shocked him. She didn't crawl away from the danger. She crawled toward it. Teos cursed, a string of Korean expletives that would have peeled paint. He popped up, firing 3 precise shots over the bar top to suppress the attackers, giving Chifurum the split second she needed. She grabbed Jiho by the collar and dragged him behind the heavy industrial ice machine. She ripped off her apron, pressing it against his wound. "Look at me!" she commanded the boy, her voice steady amidst the chaos. "Breathe. You're okay. I've got you." Teos watched her. Bullets were chewing up the mahogany wood inches from his head, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. She was covered in broken glass and spilled liquor, blood on her hands, death in the air, and she was entirely focused on saving someone else. She wasn't a damsel. She was a warrior. His security team finally rallied, flanking the attackers. The firefight lasted 3 minutes, but it felt like 3 lifetimes. When the last echo of the gunshots faded, leaving only the ringing in their ears and the smell of cordite, Teos stood up. He walked over to where Chifurum was kneeling. She was trembling now, the adrenaline fading. "Chifurum," he said, reaching out to touch her shoulder. She flinched. She looked up at him, and the look in her eyes broke something inside him. It wasn't fear. It was disgust. "This is your life," she whispered, looking around at the destruction, at the wounded people. "This is what you are." "I protected you," Teos said, his voice hoarse. "You brought this here." She stood up, her hands shaking. "These people, Jiho, they almost died because of you, because of your wars." "I handled it," Teos said, stepping closer. "It's over." "It's never over," Chifurum shouted. The club fell silent. No one shouted at the boss. "It's just a pause until the next time, and next time it might be me, or my sister, or some kid who just wanted a drink." She untied her ruined apron and threw it on the floor. It landed with a wet slap in a puddle of spilled bourbon and blood. "I quit," she said. "You can't," Teos said, panic rising in his chest for the first time in a decade. "I'll pay you double, triple. I'll put security on your house." "Keep your blood money, King Teos," she said, stepping over the broken glass. "I want to live, and I can't live in a graveyard." She walked out. She walked past the bodies, past the cops rushing in, past the girls like Chanel who were crying in the corner. She walked out into the cold soul night, and she didn't look back. Teos stood in the wreckage of his empire, realizing that for all his power, all his money, and all his men, he had just lost the only valuable thing in the room. Winter settled over Seoul like a funeral shroud. The autumn rains turned into biting sleet that grayed out the neon skyline. The city shivered. But inside the penthouse on the 50th floor of the 7 Stars Tower, the temperature was always a perfect, climate-controlled 72 degrees. It was perfect. It was sterile. It was dead. 6 months. 182 days since she walked out of the wreckage of the Vanta. 182 days since Teos had tasted anything that felt real. The club had reopened 3 weeks after the shooting. The damage was repaired overnight. Bullet holes plastered, shattered mahogany replaced with imported ebony, the blood scrubbed away by crews who knew how to remove stains from anything. The Vanta was more popular than ever. The shooting had given it a dark allure. The wealthy kids of Seoul flocked to it, desperate to party in a place where something real had happened. Teo sat in his booth. The same booth. "Boss?" A young man stood nervously at the table. This was the new head bartender. He was Korean, impeccably dressed in a vest and tie, with a resume that included top hotels in Gangnam. He was skilled. He was polite. He was terrified of Teos. "Your drink, sir," the bartender whispered, placing a crystal glass on the table. "Blue label, neat, just how you like it." Teos looked at the amber liquid. It was the best scotch money could buy. Smooth, rich, prestigious. He took a sip. It tasted like water. It tasted like nothing. "Take it away," Teos said, his voice flat. "Sir, is something wrong with the vintage? I can open the 82. Take it away." The bartender scrambled to remove the glass, his hands shaking. Teos watched him go. He missed the challenge. He missed the way Chifurum would have rolled her eyes and told him to stop brooding. He missed the black Manhattan made with cheap rye that tasted like smoke and truth. He stood up. The music was too loud. The perfume was too sweet. He couldn't breathe here anymore. "Viper," he murmured into his collar. A shadow detached itself from the wall. Viper appeared at his elbow. "Sir." "Car." The ride through Seoul was silent. Teos stared out the window at the passing lights. "The northern faction?" Teos asked, breaking the silence. "Dissolved," Viper replied efficiently. "We found their safe house in Incheon 2 days ago. They won't trouble you again." "Good." Teos felt no satisfaction. He had crushed his enemies. He had expanded his territory. He was the undisputed king of the underworld, and he had never felt more like a prisoner. "And the other matter?" Teos asked. He didn't look at Viper. He looked at his own reflection in the dark window. Viper reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. He handed it over without a word. Teos opened it. They were surveillance photos, taken from a distance, grainy, zoomed in. Photo 1, a small rundown storefront in Itaewon, a for lease sign in the window. Photo 2, Chifurum wearing paint-splattered overalls, carrying a heavy box of supplies. She looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes. But she was smiling at something a contractor was saying. Photo 3, Chifurum sitting on the floor of the empty, dusty building, eating takeout noodles with a chopstick in one hand and a blueprint in the other. Teos traced the curve of her face in the photo with his thumb. "She's over budget," Viper reported, his voice devoid of judgment. "The contractors are trying to overcharge her because she's a foreigner. She's working double shifts at a cafe in the mornings to pay for the renovations. She's exhausted, boss." Teos felt a surge of protective rage. He could end her struggle with a single phone call. He could buy the building anonymously and gift it to her. He could threaten the contractors until they worked for free. He could pave her road with gold. "Do you want me to intervene?" Viper asked, watching him closely. "We can fix the contractor issue." Teos stared at the photo of her eating noodles on the floor. She looked tired, yes, but she looked free. She was building something. It was hers. If he stepped in, if he used his power to smooth the path, he would taint it. He would turn her dream into another one of his possessions. "I want to live," she had said. "I don't want to be a decoration in your empire." "No," Teos said, his voice straining with the effort of restraint. "Do nothing. Let them overcharge her. Let her struggle." "Sir?" Viper sounded surprised. "She needs to know it's hers," Teos whispered. "If I touch it, it becomes blood money. She needs to build it with her own hands. That's the only way she'll keep it." He slid the photos back into the envelope. "But keep watching her. If anyone threatens her safety, physically, then burn them down. But until then, let her be. Understood." Teos leaned his head back against the leather seat. This was his penance, to watch her struggle and not help, to love her enough to leave her alone. Months bled into one another. Teos became a ghost in his own life. He attended meetings, he signed contracts, he ordered hits. He did it all with a terrifying mechanical efficiency. The fear of him grew in the streets. They whispered that Kang Teos had lost his heart, that he had become a demon who felt no pain and no mercy. They were half right. He felt no mercy. But he felt pain every second of every day. He found himself driving to Itaewon late at night, parking 3 blocks away from her storefront. He would sit in the dark car, watching the lights inside. He watched the dusty windows turn clean. He watched the sign go up, hand-painted, elegant. The Roots. He saw her sweeping the front step at 2 a.m., shivering in the cold, but looking at her sign with a pride he had never felt for his skyscrapers. He wanted to get out of the car. He wanted to walk across the street, wrap his coat around her, and tell her he was sorry. Sorry for the shooting. Sorry for the world he lived in. Sorry that he couldn't change who he was. But he stayed in the car. He gripped the steering wheel until his leather gloves creaked. "You are the darkness," he told himself. "Stay away from the light, or you'll snuff it out." Then came the night in early spring. The frost was finally melting. Teos returned to his penthouse after a brutal negotiation with the triads. He was covered in invisible filth. He walked into his foyer, tossing his keys on the marble table. There was a letter there. It wasn't in the usual pile of business correspondence. It was small, cream-colored, heavy cardstock. He picked it up. There was no return address, just his name, written in a handwriting he recognized immediately. Bold loops, sharp, confident lines. His heart, which he thought had stopped beating 6 months ago, hammered against his ribs. He opened the envelope. "To the man who likes his truth with a side of Yolof. I built it. It's standing. It's real. Opening night, Friday, 8 p.m., The Roots, P.S. I found a supplier for the peppers. Come hungry." Teos stared at the card. A sound escaped his throat, half laugh, half sob. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't erased him. She had built her castle, and she was lowering the drawbridge. Just for him. He looked out the window at the sprawling, glittering city of Seoul. For the first time in 6 months, the lights didn't look like cold stars. They looked like navigation beacons. "Viper!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty penthouse, alive again. "Get the car!" The king was coming out of exile. It was a thick, cream-colored card. No logo. Just an address in Itaewon and a name. The Roots. Teos didn't bring his security. He didn't bring a driver. He drove himself, parking his black sedan down the street. The Roots was small. It wasn't a club. It was a lounge. Warm yellow light spilled out of the windows. Inside, there was no techno, just the rich sound of a saxophone. The furniture was velvet and wood, not chrome and leather. It smelled of spices and home. He walked in. The bell above the door chimed, and there she was. Chifurum stood behind the bar. She looked different. Her hair was loose, a halo of curls. She wore a dress of deep emerald green. She looked rested. She looked happy. She looked like a queen in her own kingdom. She looked up, her hands stilled on the cocktail shaker. The room held its breath. Teos walked to the bar. He didn't sit. He stood there, waiting for her to tell him to leave, waiting for the anger. "You found the place," she said softly. "I heard the owner makes the best drinks in Seoul," he said. "She's picky about her customers," Chifurum replied, but there was no bite in it. A small smile, barely there, tugged at the corner of her mouth. "No gangsters allowed." "What about retired gangsters?" Teos lied. He wasn't retired, but for her, he would pretend. Or maybe, for her, he would make it true. "We'll see," she said. She placed a coaster in front of him. "What do you want?" "Something real," he said. "Something that lasts." Chifurum looked at him. She looked at the man who had brought war to her doorstep, the man who represented everything she hated, but also the man who had covered her body with his own when the bullets flew. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes. She saw the loneliness. She reached for a bottle, not the bitter Amaro this time. She reached for something sweeter, something with warmth. "I can make you something," she said, pouring the drink. "But you have to drink it on the patio. My rules, my territory." "Your rules," Teos agreed, taking the glass. He walked to the patio. He waited, and a moment later, she came out to join him. She didn't stand behind a bar. She stood next to him. They stood there in the quiet of the night, two people from different worlds, standing on the fragile line where those worlds intersected. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, but it was a beginning. And in a city of lies, that was the only truth that mattered. And that is where we leave Teos and Chifurum, standing on the patio under the soul stars. It wasn't a fairy tale ending wrapped in a bow. It was something better. It was something real. Now look at me. If you sat through this entire emotional roller coaster, if you felt the rage when Chanel attacked her, if you felt the heat during that Yalaf rice scene, and you are about to leave this video without subscribing, you are breaking my heart. Do not be the person who eats a 5-star meal and walks out without tipping the chef. It costs you nothing to support the channel, but it means the world to us. Hit the like button if you think Chifurum was the queen she thought she was. Comment Black Manhattan if you made it to the end. And smash that subscribe button and turn on the bell. I'm Ken. This is Ken's Romance Stories. Stay romantic, stay dangerous, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.